welcome to this webinar on the impact of generated artificial intelligence on the landscape of higher education. It is great to have all of your company. My name is Pushpa Sanaya, and I'm a senior academic at Victoria University and also the chair of HERDSA Victoria. First of all, I wish to acknowledge and pay respects to the people of the Kulin Nation on whose land my university operates. I pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. As many of you are participating today based elsewhere, we pay our respects to the traditional owners of the land from wherever you may be joining us. If you wish, you can acknowledge your local traditional owners by typing this into the chat function. We'd like to welcome our great panel of speakers today, Associate Professor Trish McCluskey from Deakin University, Associate Professor Danny Liu from University of Sydney, and our amazing student panel also from the University of Sydney. We'll start off with Trish and Danny, and then throw to the student panel and finish with questions from the audience today. I encourage you to post questions for the panel in Padlet. We'll post the link in the chat, or feel free to use the QR code. You can like other questions as well and post comments. And you can also feel free to post questions in the Q&A function in Zoom as well. Just to let you know, this session will be recorded and uploaded also to the HERDSA webinar website, and we will also make the Padlet notes available at that time. All right. Having said that, I will now welcome, I will stop sharing, and I'll welcome Trish to
I'm here, Pushpa, don't worry, I haven't gone away.
Excellent.
Thank you,
Trish.
Okay, I've just realized as I pulled up the slide that I'm actually dressed to complement my organizational colors. I hope I get some brownie points for that, because it certainly wasn't intentional. Anyway, I'm joining you today from the lands of the Wurundjeri, and I'm delighted to participate in this panel with my colleagues Danny, Isabella, Amgad, and Jack. This is a tough gig because what we were asked to do was talk about where to from here on the impact of generative AI on the landscape of higher education. It's been happening not even 6 months since this hit our shores, and we've all been reeling and trying to navigate our way through the various challenges that it has presented to us, our students, and our communities. The problem is, where is here? And here, we're all in different stages of here-ness. I think that there are some people who are really familiar and have probably been to a heap of these webinars and are reading blogs and are having conversations about it. And there's other people where they're thinking, this may not go away and I just need to dip my toe in the water. So I've been thinking about it. I like to think in terms of metaphors and stories. And one of the metaphors that I've been talking about all years has been wrangling the monster. And I thought about, I'm trying to do some writing on this and thinking about what are the various challenges for us. And I came up with the concept of the Hydra. Now, you may not be aware of the Hydra dragon, although I think anyone who's in my generation and watched Hercules, the Hydra is a one-body dragon with about 5 to 9 heads. And the Hydra dragons were often used as symbols of strength, power, and danger. And the fact that the Hydra, once its head is slain, it can regrow. And that seems to be what's happening. We've solved one problem and suddenly we move on to something else. However, the Hydra is also seen as a symbol of hope, as it suggests that even in the face of death, there's always the possibility of new life. So like AI, it's constantly evolving, expanding, and adapting to the new challenges and opportunities it poses, both threats and benefits for all of our work in higher education going forward. But the point I want to make is that it's important that we think about this holistically, The Hydra is a body with multiple heads, and we pay our attention to the different heads, but we move together with it as a whole body. And I think that that's really important. Otherwise, we risk diversifying and going off on different tangents around higher education and not joining up the dots to talk to each other. So my Hydra looks a bit like this. I had to think about it, and I thought, what are some of the issues that are challenging us in our environment in higher education where we're all hopefully working? And I came up with the concept of we have to navigate people, which is the most important one, the place where we operate, the processes that we use in our everyday work, the policies that guide us, and what are the possibilities for the future. So I like to start with people because people are the most important. You've probably heard the term keeping the human in the loop. That is critical. This technology is only as good as we choose to make it and to shape it and to work with it. We also have to be aware of what the various risks are associated with it, but also the potentiality. So if you look at some of these colleagues, and this is just a brainstorm who works at my university, you know, we tend to think that the university is made up of students and teachers or researchers, but there's a whole population of other staff working in the university who are equally as challenged in navigating this new space that we find ourselves in. I've done a couple of presentations to our student services staff, and they are just as keen to learn how their jobs in terms of enrollment, student advice, housing, various things, how their role will change and how they can make sure that they actually stay current and up to date, because everybody is anxious about their jobs and their positions going forward. So it's up to us to become competent and to navigate and use these tools for good and to support ourselves to augment our role in the workplace. I did tongue-in-cheek put car parking down at the bottom because we're always looking for a solution to car parking and no one has solved that one yet. So maybe AI will help us with car parking. Or maybe we won't need car parking because we won't have universities anymore. Who knows? I will just leave that one sitting there. If we think about the university and place, which is the next head of the Hydra that we're thinking about, where is the university? What is the university with AI? We've been arguing this for many, many years. It certainly tested our limits and our understanding during COVID, because who knew that we could all work off campus online using digital technology, and some of us not set foot on a university campus for almost 3 years, especially here in Victoria. You'll know what I'm talking about. So if we think about what AI can do and what it can offer for the university digitally, we've got the iPhone. So students can now pace their learning using a chat bot, to a generative AI bot, to help them to shape their learning and to prompt them in their learning and to pursue learning interests that they have that may not necessarily be in the curriculum. We also have artificial intelligence that can now map every inch of a university campus. We've been able to do that in the past, but the data was so big, being able to analyze and use that data to make predictions and to plan from has always not been so efficient. So I think now with AI, we've got the ability to do that. For example, we can monitor how many students come on campus every day, what classrooms they use, whether they're mature students, younger students, what color of clothes they wear. These are some of the technologies that we can do. And then we can say, okay, well, we can sell off half that campus because no one ever uses it. Or yes, we keep booking these classrooms, but students are not actually coming to them. And I know that I've had the experience of walking past a number of classrooms recently in lecture theatres where a sole academic has been standing in there with a microphone recording a Zoom meeting with no students in the lecture theatre. So perhaps we can be more efficient with our spaces as a result of how we can be informed by artificial intelligence. What are the processes? What are the things that we actually do at university? The curriculum will need to change. It will need to change in terms of both content and structure. The jobs of the future and the worlds of the future will require us to use and to understand and to apply AI. And our job is to equip our staff and our students with the skills to be able to read those worlds and act on them with agency. So we need to teach students about ethics, and we need to teach them AI literacy. We also need to teach our staff. Students need to have the option as to whether they join or whether they don't join. They need to have transparency as to how their data is being used. So when I've got curriculum up top, that's the one that I think a lot of us are thinking about today. We need to not just add AI literacy into the curriculum. We actually also need to think, what do we take out? So what are the skills that students, or the knowledge that students can now teach themselves or pursue using a handheld device and some of these bots that are currently able to augment their learning? How we teach students, how we shape their learning, how we actually create pockets of content rather than massive courses of content that students have to navigate, and we assess them sequentially and then we give them a grade at the end of it. So I think the leaning more towards micro-credentials and smaller chunked pieces of learning for students to engage with, should that be students who are attending a full-time course or students who are coming to the university from the community, are things that we will need to consider. It impacts research as well, and things like it can automate some tasks, it can filter data, it can organize data, but it also, we need to think about the quality and the validity and the reliability of a lot of the information that we get using tools like generative AI. These are the skills that we need to encourage. Policy, procedure, and impact. Our AI influences the rules, the regulations of higher education, both internally and externally. HERDSA are very interested in this space, as are a lot of our professional bodies and accrediting bodies. They may have different guidelines and different rules for how we actually incorporate artificial intelligence into our curriculum, into our research practices, and that may create some tensions for us, but we need to have a clear understanding of them. It can help improve the governance, the management, and the evaluation of universities. So things like providing data-driven decision-making support, monitoring performance and outcomes, and most of all, enhancing our accountability and transparency of our operations. However, more importantly, and most importantly, I should say, AI also requires new policies to address the legal, the ethical, and the social issues that AI use in education, such as I've mentioned before, fairness, accountability, and the new word in the lexicon is explainability of the system. So we need to give students and educators a voice in how generative AI is developed and applied in higher education. So those are the four, and then I always like to finish on a positive note, a promise. What does the future hold for us going forward? When we wrangled all of those other things, we've revised our curriculum, we've changed how we do research, we've revised all of our policies, we've knocked down the university buildings. How do we move forward with artificial intelligence? What does the future hold for us? I believe personally that it's very optimistic. I think if we proactively are thoughtful about how we manage the risks and the rewards, it can help us to advance the goals of education, such as fostering lifelong learning, enhancing employability and citizenship skills, and promoting social justice and inclusion. It can also help us to achieve the goals of our research by generating new knowledge or augmenting us generating new knowledge. It helps us to solve complex problems and contribute to societal well-being. It'll enable students to engage in broader communities, broader global communities, to perhaps consult with authority figures from the past, speak to people from the past. And I don't know if any of you have seen that mashup of a video where we have Socrates having a conversation with Steve Jobs and John Lennon. And it is pretty compelling how when information exists, we can create interactions with inanimate figures or people from the past who are no longer around. It will also enable us to communicate with colleagues and communities across the world who perhaps English is not their first language, because we can now get over the language barrier that very often has been difficult for students to engage in. perhaps some of our learning and teaching, our placements, some of the opportunities we give to students to increase employability skills and engage with communities, being able to engage with those in remote areas without actually traveling to them is also a possibility. So I think it also challenges the values and norms, which, you know, I don't want to gloss over. I tend to be a bit of a techno-utopian rather than dystopian, and I get excited about it. But I'm currently standing on the drawbridge between excitement and absolute trepidation, and trying to work with my teams and my colleagues to how we actually can cross over or get some balance within what we do. So I think it's going to require a collaborative, a multidisciplinary, an engaged and connected approach to moving forward, to make sure that we are not here to be done onto, but we are here to control the narrative and to engage with the potential of the tools. So I think, Pushpa, I leave it there. I have to say, this presentation was not generated by artificial intelligence, as you can see from my very inappropriate pulled together slides. But, you know, when I did ask it to do a presentation for me, it did it just like that with a completely different deck. But most people who know me will know it didn't look anything like my voice. It didn't sound anything like my voice. So this is the usual, they bring the human into the loop and make it authentic. Thank you.
Thank you, Trish. That's amazing. I think the Hydra Dragon analogy is spot on. And in fact, we educators have to think about all of the different heads of the dragon to enable us to work efficiently with AI moving forward. With that, I will invite Danny Liu to share his screen with us. Thank you, Danny.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Trish. That was an amazing, amazing introduction, and thanks, Pusha, for organizing this. I love the idea of standing on the drawbridge between excitement and trepidation. I think it's a good place to be, actually. We need a dash of both. And I love the ending about possibilities. Thinking about all those amazing things you mentioned before. One of the things that we often hear when we talk to staff about this is, but it's extra work and we are exhausted from 3 years of COVID. And so I think what I want to show now is a few ideas about how AI might actually be able to help us alleviate some of that workload in some practical ways from a teacher perspective. And then we have Jack, Angad, and also Isabella showing us from a student perspective soon what that might look like. So to help us do this, I'm going to paste the link into the webinar chat so that you have something to look at. All the resources that and prompts I'm going to be showing on the screen come from this document, so you're free to have a look at that down the track if you want to. So to get us started, I might share my screen and then we can get going. Okay, so that document that's on the screen now is the one that I shared, and that link is in the Zoom chat. Feel free to copy and paste anything you like from it. But what I want to kind of think about is how we can use AI, especially GPT, to help us as teachers. And one of the things that are really important, I think, is to kind of start with thinking about what makes good teaching, what makes good learning. So the first example here is we want to take us back to maybe you're a teacher who is starting in week -4 or something. You've been given a new subject and you need to actually plan some lessons for it. Okay, and we all know that there are some things which work for learning and some things which don't work for learning. And the things on the screen now that the AI is telling us about, like retrieval practice, elaboration, analogies, active learning, they're all quite good. And so to start off in the first demo prompt, I'm going to kind of get the AI to tell us more about these things. And I'll explain why I'm doing this very soon. So retrieval practice is good because it forces learners to pull things out from their memory that helps learning. Elaboration is good as well because it helps them to connect things, helps them to problem solve. Analogies is in a similar way quite useful for learning as well because it helps learners build connections between different concepts in their minds. And the final thing, active learning, is really important as well because it helps learners to, I guess, actively engage in the content and the concepts that they're trying to learn as well. Okay, so I'm getting the AI to tell us more about these. But the reason why isn't to tell you about them because you probably know about all these already. But the reason is I want to get the AI to put this into its chat history. The next thing I'm going to ask the AI is I'm going to ask the AI act as a expert vet sciences educator. Okay, I need a 50-minute tutorial about animal behavioral management in a clinical context. Design some activities that use these ideas that I've just asked about. So I'm going to do this send this to the AI, and the AI is going to generate this 50-minute tutorial for me. And because I've already asked it about active learning and retrieval practice and these kinds of things, it knows a bit more about this in its chat history. And that's important because the AI, when you converse with it in this kind of chat format, it uses that previous context in the chat history to draw on new things that it might give you. And so what you can see here is, if I'm a new instructor to this particular subject, I don't really quite know what I should be doing. I may have a syllabus. This is a good way to kind of get started, save me some time in trying to think about how I could do some lesson planning. Now, I'm never going to actually follow this word for word. As a human expert I'm not an expert in vet science, but if I was, I would then go to this and think, this is a good start, but I would definitely modify this before taking it to my students. But what it has done is it's solved the blank page problem for me. It's helped me to be able to get that head start to save a lot of time in brainstorming and thinking about how I could teach this. Okay, so I'm going to let that run for a little bit, and then I'm going to go have a look at my next prompt. The next prompt that you'll see on the Google Doc is something that I call the reverse Socratic tutor. For this, I'm going to stop this AI from generating. For this, I'm going to start a new chat, and then I'm going to put in that second prompt, which is act as a confused student who is learning biology. I'm going to be your tutor, so we're changing discipline now. In each message, I'll teach you something, and you've got to ask me questions and act confused. And so let's have a think about this. So pretend that we've just planned our lesson. We're preparing to meet our students for the first time. If it's the first time we're teaching something, maybe we're not so sure what students might get confused about. And so here, oh, great. Okay, I'm getting it to pretend to be a student. Confused. Cells are the building blocks of life. They need energy to function. And you can see that it's taking up this persona, this role as this confused student. Okay, so it's being a bit facetious here. It's not electricity, it's ATP. Do you know about this molecule? Okay, and so you can see that using this AI, it's not just about having the AI generate essays for us and those kind of things. It's actually, you can actually program it or tell it to do certain things, to act as certain personas to help you talk through things as well. Okay, so here we go. So starting a conversation with me now, and I can then go on and practice teaching, I guess, what I would do to students. Okay, the next example that I have in the Google Doc is something I call distilling student responses. And so say, for example, I've just done a Qualtrics survey with my students. It's always good to do this, saying, why are you doing this subject? Why are you interested? Where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? Okay, so say I've got a whole bunch of 500 responses from my students, and it's really hard for me as a human being with lack of time to actually go through this. And so what I could do is I could ask the AI to look at this for me. And so, for example, I'm saying, what are the main themes and interests from these responses below? Okay, and I'm going to paste a bunch of responses, which are all fake responses. I'm not going to reveal any student data here. But what it's doing here is I'm basically getting it to do a really basic thematic analysis for me. And it's telling me a lot of my students are interested in biotechnology. A lot of my students are interested in, or some of my students are interested in the intersection between biology and art. There's many who are interested in disease and treatments. And so what I can do is I've done my Qualtrics survey, I've used the AI to parse the information in it, and now I can go in front of my class and say, I know a lot of you are interested in disease. I'm going to tweak my my examples towards your interests and those kind of things. Okay, again, saving us time as educators. And not only saving us time, but helping us better connect what we're doing to what our students' interests are. Okay, I'm going to stop that and go to the next example. The next example I've got is, I call it an analogy generator. So again, I'm going to start a new chat for this. And then this one is act as an expert in physiology. Okay, come up with 3 creative analogies to explain energy systems and cardiovascular responses to exercise. And so what it's doing here is it's thinking pop culture, Avengers is pretty popular. And so it's giving me an analogy which is based around this. And if I know a bit more about my students, then I could say, using analogies drawn from, and I could put in my students' interests, and that way I could personalize the teaching a bit more to what they're after as well. Okay, so analogies are obviously a good way to teach because it helps to draw links between abstract concepts into concrete reality. Obviously, when you would do or use the analogies is you wouldn't necessarily just present this analogy to students and say, this is it, full stop. You'd use the analogy as a starting point to do a lot of teaching with. So you'd say, let's pick apart the good parts of this analogy. What are the drawbacks of the analogy? How can we extend this analogy better? How can we come up with a completely different analogy to explain these concepts? Okay, but what the AI is doing is it's giving us a little bit of a leg up to save us time in coming up with the basics on our own. Another example, the next example I've got on the Google Doc is something called a perspective generator. Now, to do this, I'm going to pop into a different AI here. I'm going to pop into Bing Chat. And Bing Chat is actually freely available to everyone now. And you can just go to it by going to bing.com/chat. The reason why I'm using Bing Chat, and I'll show you why. Let me just zoom in on this a little bit. For this particular prompt, again, I may be going into a class, I might need some examples or case studies. Instead of writing my own case studies or examples, which might take me a lot of time, I'm going to get AI to start generating them for me. So for this one, I'm asking the AI, give me 5 different perspectives on something which is quite recent, the Great Resignation. And I'm asking this particular AI, which is Bing Chat, because Bing Chat is connected to the internet. And so Bing Chat, you see here, what it's doing first, it's reading my question, and then it's thinking about, oh, maybe I need a bit more information. And so what it's doing is searching the internet for the Great Resignation. And then it uses the answers, the websites that it finds, together with its brain, I guess it's its neural network, in order to come up with answers to my particular prompt. Okay, and so you can see that, for example, this very first example from a manager from Japan, they talk about loyalty and respect. And it's quite nice because obviously in Japanese culture, loyalty and respect is a really key thing, and it's been able to parse that from its searches maybe. Okay, and so the benefit of Bing Chat here is that it's able to use the power of GPT-4 and also the knowledge from the up-to-date knowledge from the internet in order to generate new things for you. Okay, so that's another thing that you could use it for. Another thing I'll stay on Bing Chat for is my next example, which is called an ideas synthesizer. I'll start a new topic here. And this one is, I'm getting it to look up the latest trends in architectural design. So maybe I'm an architecture teacher and I need to kind of start my students thinking about what the latest is, get them to critique some designs, get them to critique some perspectives. And instead of spending a lot of time searching for this myself, what I might do is I might try to shortcut some of that time by asking the AI to do the initial legwork for me. Okay, so what it's doing now in Bing Chat is it's looking up, searching the live internet for latest trends, searching the live internet for what the leading architects are saying right now, and then it's curating these together for me. Okay, so it's saying, based on these results, here are some of the trends, here are some of the leading architects' thoughts. And then the third part of the prompt that I've asked it to do is actually use DALL-E, which is an image generation tool, to draw these based on your descriptions. Okay, so it's got the latest trends, it's got what the leading architects have thought, it's got its third part of its response, which is kind of a collation or a synthesis of all these ideas. And then not only is it going to synthesize these ideas in text for me, but it's going to try, hopefully it works, it's going to try and synthesize these in a visual form. Okay, so let's just see if this works. Okay. Come on, Bing. There we go. Okay, so you see that now what it's doing is it's essentially looked at its own response, and now it's going to generate a visual representation of its response for me. And we'll see what amazing pictures it brings up now. So what you would use these for in class, amazing, look at that. I wouldn't mind living in a place like that. It's using these, it's using the internet and the tools that are connected to it in order to generate something. And what it's doing for me as an architecture teacher is it is saving me time in looking things up. I'm still going to apply my expertise when I teach this to students or when I discuss this in class with students, but at least it's giving me that leg up. Now, the next example that I have is, I call it an interleaving assistant. And this particular prompt says that I'm a computer science instructor. I've just taught my students about databases, and now I'm going to be talking to them about networks and security, okay? I know that interleaving is really useful for learning because it helps students to connect disparate concepts together. And so give me some suggestions on how I could do this, all right? And so it's going to do that. It's going to give me some activities where I can help the students to connect their previous topic with the current topic, okay? Because interleaving is something that is really powerful for learning. And so here it says divide the students and get them to consider these security measures in databases, for example. And these are questions that you might want to pose to your students. Again, I would never just use this verbatim from the AI. I would actually take my expertise and modify these so that they work for my students. But what it's done is, again, it's given me that draft that I can work on as a teacher, saving me a lot of time. And maybe it's even helped me think of things I wouldn't have thought of. Okay. I'm going to skip the next one because you run that by yourself, which is the generate multiple choice questions for me. But this next one I'm going to have a look at, which is the assessment ideas generator. Now, the assessment ideas generator is a nice one. Trish was saying before that a lot of the things that we need to think about are how AI impacts curriculum, and assessment is really a big part of that. We could get stuck thinking about how can we escape from particularly written or essay form sort of assessments, and you can get AI, ironically, to help us with this. And so here we're saying, given these learning outcomes, come up with, let's just do 3 creative assessment ideas that could help students achieve these learning outcomes. And so what it's going to do is it's going to look at these and suggest some non-essay style assessments for me. And so, for example, it's got a debate, it's given me a context, and it's described for me how this can be a bit more authentic for students as well, okay? And so it's actually even gone to the extent to actually say these are kinds of the skill development goals that the students will achieve, which are linked to your learning outcomes, which this particular assessment addresses. And it'll give me a bunch of these. And because it's a chat, what I could do to it is I could say, let me just stop this, and I say, I like number 1, tell me more, and how I can adapt this for a clinical context, okay? And then I could, just converse with it in order to generate these ideas. And again, I wouldn't take this verbatim. I'd always adapt it based on what I know about the discipline, and change it based on my expertise. Okay, but what it's done again is giving me that head start. Okay, second last example, rubric drafting. So this one, I'm asking it to be an expert and writer of assessment rubrics. Rubrics are pretty hard to write. I struggle with writing rubrics, but what I'm doing here is I'm getting it to help me. I need to write a marking rubric for a uni level assessment, help me to generate the rows and columns, ask me about the rubric that I want, okay? So let's see. Do you want the students to critique implementation? Oops, can't type. Scholarly analysis. I also want them to think about risks to students and teachers. Okay, so it's acting like an assistant here because of the particular prompt that I fed it. It's helping me to design this rubric and also giving me ideas about it while I'm trying to think about this. And so then I could say, those are great. Let's go with number 4 and number 1. So helpful. All right, so let's do that. And then organization, no, thanks. Okay, and so it's decided it's got enough from me, and it's going to give me a draft rubric. And again, the rubric that it gives me is not going to be the rubric I'm going to give for my students, but it's going to be something that I can actually start adapting and editing for myself. And so it's giving me this thing. in kind of code format, but we can kind of, sometimes it reformats into an actual table, which is nice, sometimes it doesn't. But what you can see from here is that what it's doing is it's generating all the different, oh, it's a bit sad, it didn't work that time. It usually works. Okay. It usually puts up quite good expressions in these high distinction categories and stuff, but for some reason today this particular thing's not working. That's another thing with prompting. If one prompt doesn't work, just try it again, and it'll probably work on the second time, or just try and adapt some of your prompts. All right, this last one is one that I'm quite fond of. This last one is actually the one that I've used this semester in my own teaching. This last one, I call it a feedback beautification assistant, because I'm not very good at writing feedback in a beautiful way for my students. So act as an expert educator. I'm going to give you a summary of the notes that I've taken about a student's assignment. I want you to then expand these into something which is actually really encouraging for students, okay? Base your feedback on the assignment brief, which I provided down the bottom, and also the marking rubric, okay? And so I've given it the assignment brief, I've given it the marking rubric, and then I'm going to send this prompt to the AI, and it's going to say, okay, give me your notes. Okay, so I'm going to say, great integration of literature. Oops. I'm going to say, need more application to real world scenarios. Need more practice examples. Okay. And obviously, I'm in a rush now, so I'm not going to type it out. But if I was actually marking a student's assignment, I'd give a bit more detailed notes here. But what it's going to do is it's going to take my really rough notes and it's going to turn it into something which is a bit more digestible for students. Again, I wouldn't just copy and paste this into the LMS for students. I would adapt this based on my expertise and based on my reading of the student's assignment. But I quite like this because it saved me as an educator a lot of time in putting together the pros of the feedback. And it's also meant that I haven't had to get the AI to mark the assessment. I've seen people who have submitted student work to AI. I personally feel that's a really big privacy and ethical no-no. But instead what I've done is, as a human marker, I've graded the assignment, I've written these notes, and all the AI is doing, I guess it's helping me to compose sentences from these notes, and then I would then correct it as a human marker. Okay, so I think that's it for this little bit. I'm going to stop my screen share. You have the links to the prompts that I've been using, so feel free to adapt these as you so feel free to, and also some resources up there which are quite useful to follow up with as well. So I'm going to hand over to Pushpa and also the students, because they'll show you from a student perspective why the AI can be quite powerful.
Thank you, Danny. That was amazing, sharing the AI in action. It's definitely given everyone a lot of food for thought, I think. Everything from generating analogies, assessment ideas, rubrics, feedback. Amazing. Thank you. Interest of time, I will now introduce the student panel. We have Isabella Meltzer, Anga Chawla, and Jack Quinlan from the University of Sydney. Isabella is a Law and Arts 5th-year student. Anga is in Mechanical Engineering and Commerce. And Jack is in Software Engineering and Neuroscience. So I'm going to start off with a question. How do you feel generative AI might help you to learn better at university? So how would you use it to approach an assignment, say, using ChatGPT? Isabella?
Hi, yeah, it's been a great tool to fast track the beginning of an assignment process. I use generative AI to help me understand the essay question, provide high-level background of the topic, and assist in that conceptualization process. So I'm just going to share my screen quickly and demonstrate how I've been doing that. Okay, hopefully everyone can see this. So my initial prompt here was the essay question I was assigned. I want to get a high-level understanding of what the topic is, who the philosopher is, and their general position. And then from that general background information the generative AI has fed me, I'm able to feed it further questions so I can deepen my knowledge on the topic. I now know that there are 2 main accounts for that conclusion he gave, and I can explore what those are. And then from there, I can, in my mind, I'm already starting to think about how I can argue this in an essay form and answer the assignment question. And ChatGPT can also help me in structuring that essay and pulling those ideas together. So this is definitely a lot different from what my ultimate essay outline looked like, but it gave me an idea of how I could structure my ideas. It also has been really helpful in helping me formulate essay questions. And there was an assignment this semester where I had to formulate my own essay question. And this was a very, very long process of figuring out what I was interested in, how to narrow a topic down to an essay question that assessed something very specifically and answered a very niche part of the topic. And so I was able to, within this one conversation, so ChatGPT would remember all the prompts, my prior prompts and what I'm interested in, and break down the topic into further, more narrow parts. And so throughout the process, I can ask further questions on topics that come up and evolve. It like thinks alongside me, and I can just feed what my interests are and into ChatGPT, and then slowly discover what topics I'm interested in and want to explore, and what essay questions are around that topic. And then it is also useful in the assignment process to help make some ideas more cohesive. I think once I'd done all the research myself from peer-reviewed sources, I sometimes, especially students who don't have English as their first language, may need some help with bringing those ideas together. And it's still all my own words exactly. It's just made into a cohesive paragraph. I didn't even end up using this paragraph in the essay because I realized it wasn't truly saying anything of meaning. I had to alter it a lot and tweak a lot of the sentences to actually resemble a persuasive argument, but it did kind of give me an idea of what ideas were most important that needed to be included. So that's how I've been using it. I think we'll pass on to Anga.
Thanks, Isabella.
Hi. So the way I've been using GPT in my learning, so my degree is mechatronics engineering and commerce, which are two very, very different fields. One requires a lot of essays and a lot of conceptual understanding, whereas one is very practical. One has a lot of programming, things like that. For the engineering side of it, I've been sort of using it to give me responses to certain questions I put in to deepen my understanding of maths and physics, and also to help me debug programs that I've written. The way I found it really useful in programming is if I were to debug something, I would go on Stack Exchange anywhere. I would go on the internet anyway. That's just how debugging works when you find an error. This has just made the process so much quicker. So if I can just share my screen for a second. This is a piece of code that I wrote, and I knew the error it was getting. Essentially what was happening is that it couldn't really process the number properly because of the type of code I'd written. So I copy pasted my code in, told it the error I was getting, and asked it what could be a possible source of the error. Naturally, the thing with code is there's lots of different sources for error. That was the specific error I got. It was giving me a complex number instead of an integer, which I didn't want. Because the code is so complex, it has a lot of different sources of error. It may not necessarily be an issue with my math in the code, which can result in the code breaking. And that's sort of difficult to pass through when you have a code that's 100, 150 lines. Turns out that it wasn't an issue with my math. It was an issue with the actual processing. So in code, there's a thing called overflow errors, where if you have too many decimal places, the code sort of interprets the number differently. And that's kind of difficult to spot because, again, it's not something you've written, it's just the processing of the data. So it was nice that I could save myself hours and hours of research on Stack Exchange and just use GPT to help me sift through that and figure out where the error was. It's good that I was able to use this because now I can keep an eye out for this error later on and figure out how to go around it later in a quicker fashion. So that's just how I've been using it at the moment. Jack, do you want to add?
For sure. I'll cover some different areas that it's fairly useful. So just going to share as well. One thing I found particularly useful is in testing for assessment. So I'm doing neuroscience, and one of the parts is neuroanatomy. So knowing what parts of the brain do what. So I've written up a small prompt here. It basically says you generate questions and give hints to what part of the brain you are, and I have to guess. So it's a fun and interactive way to actually learn neuroanatomy and different functions of different structures in the brain. So like, for example, here, this part of the brain is the largest and also the most complex region, plays a key role in motor function, problem solving, spontaneous speech, decision-making, social behavior. What part of the brain am I referring to? Give an answer, correct. Would you like another? And this can be taken a lot higher when you start adding your own, like what's going to be tested and what descriptions you've been given. If you do that, it becomes a lot more tailored towards your course, and it can become really useful for particularly preparing for exams. Other than that, in assignments, I mainly use it for small functions. Like if there's a small function I need to write, like finding the overlap between two range of like numbers in Python, that will take me 10 minutes to code, almost no thinking, no attention. So I can just chuck it into ChatGPT. It's something I could do like the back of my hand, but it's done 10 times as fast. And all I have to do is a little quick change to implement it. The last bit, which I'm really excited for in the future, more for ChatGPT and these generative AIs, is they'll be able to create more interactive diagrams, videos, and different types of multimedia that will really allow us to engage with content differently. And I'm really excited for that. It's becoming a lot more prevalent. Like one such example here is I've asked it to create a mind map of the functions of the amygdala. And it provides exactly that, like a mind map that I can use just as like a sort of guide in a test, for example. So it makes a lot of processes a lot more streamlined. Yeah, I think next question would probably be.
Yeah, and you could definitely generate those mind maps in class too.
Definitely.
And that would be real fun, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah, 100%. And even diagrams, like here I've got a diagram of the hippocampus. I just went, please provide me a diagram using the Wolfram Alpha plugin. And it shows me exactly where it is in the brain, which is super helpful if I have no idea.
Exactly. All right. Our next question is, how can your teachers and your university help you grow your ethical and critical use of AI? You've already touched on some of that. Angad?
Definitely that's that's a bit of an issue that we all know exists. It's a difficult topic to talk about considering the ethics. It's very easy to take advantage of. I found the most important thing for me personally was learning how restricted it is in terms of the information it actually provides you. There's a lot of issues that exist in terms of the information, in the sense that it outputs references that aren't exactly correct at times. It gives you links that don't work. It's obviously influenced by bias, because any information out that's been produced by a human has bias in it. But yeah, I feel like learning and educating myself on the fact that I can't just trust something that's on GPT. It's not 100% correct. It's not 100% unbiased. That's been the most important thing for me, to know that I still need to vet it and see what issues there can exist.
Isabella?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Angad. Teachers need to make sure we know how it works, the potential biases and limitations around it, but also to teach us how to use it in order to maximize our productivity and assist with our learning, and make clear what that right line is between doing that and breaching academic integrity. So they can do this by giving us clear examples or demonstrations in the first class of each semester or university-wide workshops. I think students are also very interested in knowing how different industries may expect us to use it, so we can prepare our skills to align with that. And also something else students probably want to know is which generative AI model to use for certain tasks based on their capabilities. So that would probably fall under how to use it to maximize our productivity and our learning.
Jack?
I really think one thing to consider on top of actually building up, more guidelines and better academic integrity policies and stuff is trying to get it out as fast as possible and like allowing as much as you can as possible, because the more people that are using it in their assignments and all types of assessments, referencing their prompts, even sharing their prompts on university networks and stuff, it's really going to provide a much deeper understanding into how it's actually being used at the moment. I feel like one of the big things, especially over the past semester, has been not even the students know to what extent it's being used. And even the universities have, well, I wouldn't say no idea, but not nearly as much as they could if they just had it opened, allowed for different assignments, people able to share prompts on, say, university pages and stuff. The education around that and learning and that insight into how it's used every day would definitely allow us to make a lot better policy, a lot better guidelines to what is the best use. So I think opening it up more is definitely something to consider and making it more accessible.
Yes, thank you, Jack. Going along with that, Trish had also made available a resource, and we've put it on Padlet in terms of classroom policies for AI. So it's definitely, like Jack says, that yes, we need to start thinking and acting about these policies sooner rather than later. So in the interest of time, just one last question. Are you actually worried about generative AI in your studies? And would you feel disadvantaged in any way if you didn't have it?
I might jump in with a super quick example.
Yeah.
Just here. Yeah, one of the things that is going to become more apparent in the future, I think, but isn't so much now, is I showed that mind map earlier where you get this really good mind map, and obviously the diagrams and stuff are going to become a lot more detailed and a lot better. But the current version that's free does it like this, which is not nearly as useful. And it's costing me to have the plus version $400 a year or $33 a month, which is outrageous for a student. So I think there definitely needs to be some equitable access for all students to these sort of tools, because some tools just make it so much easier to do some work. And yeah, it becomes a massive disadvantage for students.
Definitely. Angad?
Yeah, definitely. Like Jack said, I really want to echo that. It is an equity issue. I personally have been paying for ChatGPT as well, just to see ChatGPT-4, just to see what its capabilities are and just to play around with it. And it's miles better than GPT-3, which is available to the public for free. So that's an issue to consider, I guess, for the universities. Considering Microsoft are coming out with their own software, which is probably going to be able to be used by universities as a licensed tool that can be distributed to students. I think that equity issue can be reduced. But yeah, at the moment, I do feel that some people who know how to use it properly are more educated and who have access to a better resource, they are being advantaged.
Right. We are just going to, in the interest of time, going to take, it will just officially kind of move into question time and kind of address some of the questions from chat and Padlet, from everywhere. Tulsa, do you have some key questions for the students? Sharon's also said that, thank you so much for providing great insights.
I couldn't even unmute myself then. There are so many things between the Padlet, the question and answer forum, and the webinar chat. I've been crazy trying to cut and paste them all into a single thing. So from Trisha's perspective, there's probably a couple of questions there. There was actually one each. I don't know, Trish, if you've had a chance to look in the Padlet there. There was a couple there around your heads in terms of one about people, a couple about process, and one about policy and procedure. Have you had a chance to have a quick look at those and whether one of those jumps out at you?
I haven't. I've been answering questions that have come across around
On the other side. Yeah, I know it's hard. We've got
encourage the
three.
laggards and how we engage people, what we take out of curriculum. And I've also added in a teachable moment around how I actually put the slides behind me whenever you're presenting.
I love that.
As well. So that might be of interest to anyone who's saving the chat. So what was another one, Tulsa? Is there anything in particular that I should be paying attention to?
I'm just trying to think of the one.
I see here one for the students.
Yes, let's hear
Do you
from the
have
students.
do you have
Important
a
voices.
sense how your peers are using ChatGPT? Are they misusing it? Do you have any, broader sense of what's going on with, say, your cohorts?
If it's okay, I'll start answering that. At the moment, I think just in my friend group, we've sort of been using it as an accessory to our learning, not as a main source. I feel a lot of the issue begins when people think that it's a tool that can do your assessments for you. I've tried using it a lot over the last 7 months. I know for a fact that it cannot. That's not saying I've tried to make it do my assessments for me. That just means I've played around with it a lot. It can't do that. You need to be very, very specific in what you want it to do, and you can't give it too much to do. It just doesn't have the capacity at the moment to process that amount of information and provide you with good responses. The way, again, I've sort of used it, and I think Isabella showed as well, it's just a starting point. It is just a piece of inspiration, if you like, to make sure that we have a direction in which to go. Of course, what we submit is not the exact same as what we get from ChatGPT. That's just immoral, and that's just blindly putting faith in something which has a lot of errors in it. At the moment, I think if I can share my screen again, this is another sort of thing I developed is at the end of, so I do commerce as well. We have an accounting unit. At the end of every module on Canvas, we have a few revision questions which sort of go over the key concepts in our module. So we have exams coming up next week. So what I did was I copied all of those questions. I put it into ChatGPT and I asked it to use the Pareto principle to give me a summary. So now what I've essentially done is I have a condensed refresher, which is what I like to call it, before I go over the actual content for my exam preparation. This gives me a nice overview of what I need to know before I actually start doing proper study. It gives me a nice refresher of what I did in week 1s to 6 and what I need to know from that to build upon my knowledge from week 13. So that's how we've been using it at the moment. That's me and my friends. But yeah, Jack, Isabella, if you want to add to that.
We've got 2 seconds.
I think he covered everything.
Yes,
Yeah.
that was really insightful, Angad. It's all about learning how to use it, but it's definitely a time saver in terms of generating summaries and just getting your head around some key ideas, or to get you started, like, to give you a head start on things. Like, I can see how it's useful that way. Having said that, I think Trish has been busy answering questions around the place. And we thank you for that. We thank you for coming in today. A huge thank you to our panel speakers today as well. And just in terms of finishing up, I'm going to use Trisha's words from her ABC interview, that it's really useful for us to steer this conversation away from the cheating and surveillance narrative of AI, and just thinking about the possibilities and learning scenarios for both students and teachers in steps forward. So it's definitely critical for us to harness all of these, our collective wisdom, so to speak, and help our students and ourselves in terms of learning how to use AI efficiently. So thanks again to all of our attendees today. It was been great having you, great questions, and we'll share the Padlet questions, and feel free to reach out to us with any questions for Trish and Danny. I'm sure they'd be happy to take all of your questions. And I want to say a big thank you again to our student panel. It gives us a really useful insight into approaching this whole area. And that's invaluable, priceless. So thank you so much. Thanks again to everyone.